Kody, I hate you. Christine's words boomed through the courtroom like an unexpected storm shattering the stillness. The words hung in the air, heavy and merciless, resonating in every part of the room. For an instant, the whole world paused. No papers rustled, no whispers clung. Not even the sound of breathing was brave enough to break what had been said. Gasps spread through the courtroom benches. Heads were leaned forward, eyes wide, and stunned not only by the raw emotion in Christine's voice, but by the guts it took to put it into words. Years of heartache, pain, and betrayal had been reduced to 4 words. Words that cut deeper than any argument presented on paper and in courts ever could. Kody Brown, the proud patriarch of his vast polygamous clan, sat stock still. His face went white, lips open, no sound emerging. He had been the focus for decades. The man who ruled a household, who spoke with a commanding voice, who always got the last word. But today, here in this courtroom, that power was lost, taken from him. Broken, his gaze darted nervously about the room. To his left, journalists jotted desperately, documenting each move of this momentous occasion. To his right, strangers occupied the gallery, some nodding their heads, some covering their mouths in amazement. And right in front of him were the 3 women who best knew him: Meri, Janelle, and Christine, women who had previously stood up for him, loved him, and given up everything for him. Now their eyes burned not with love, but with fury, sorrow, and determination. The gavel of the judge lay still on the bench, but his intense gaze never shifted. He too had borne the burden of those words. I hate you. Judges daily hear lies and accusations, but few cases involved such unadulterated pain. This wasn't about contracts or property only. This was about broken trust, about something sacred being shattered, about a family torn asunder in the cruelest of terms. Christine's hands shook, but her shoulders were resolute. Years of crying, years of keeping quiet, years of being ignored. All of it detonated in that one instant. She didn't mind who was seeing. She didn't mind her voice breaking. For the first time ever, she was facing Kody Brown without fear, without shame, and without carrying his control. The audience could sense it too. You could see it in their gaze, the manner in which they shifted uncomfortably in their seats, holding their breath, anticipating what was to happen next. They weren't witnesses to a trial. They were witnesses to the downfall of a man who had built an empire of deception, only to have it fall at the feet of the women whom he believed he could silence once and for all. Kody swallowed hard, his throat constricting. He ached to yell back, to tell her of his sacrifices, to turn the story the way he had so many times before. But this wasn't his den. This wasn't a bitter argument in a private room with closed doors. This was court. The truth carried gravity here. Every word uttered was taped. Every shred of evidence scrutinized. Every feeling laid bare. And Christine's words, so unvarnished, so probing, already had set the tone. The energy in the room shifted. Kody could feel it. No longer was he the center of power. The balance had tilted. The wives weren't rivals anymore. They weren't competing for scraps of his affection. Today they were united, standing together in strength. Christine's eyes welled up with tears, but her voice never broke. She nodded at Kody, her hand shaking, her entire body quivering with years of pent-up rage. You led me to believe in forever. You let me raise our children in a house on a foundation of deceit. You smiled for the cameras while behind closed doors you destroyed my soul. And after all that, you threw me away like I was nothing. A sob echoed through the gallery. It was impossible not to ache with her. Strangers cried for her, as though they too had borne the brunt of her agony. Kody shifted uncomfortably, his attorney whispering urgently in his ear, but he couldn't make out what he was saying. The words "I hate you" echoed in his mind like a bitter flashback. Hate. Not disappointment, not sadness. Hate. That was the monument he had cut into Christine's heart. The judge leaned forward finally, his voice low but commanding. Mrs. Brown, go on. This court will hear your truth. Christine's breathing trembled, yet she nodded. She wasn't finished. Years, Your Honor. I was told to suffer, to remain quiet, To think that my sacrifices were worth it. I listened when he promised that we were creating something immortal. I listened when he assured me that family first, but it was all a deception. His love was conditional. His fidelity was non-existent. And his vows, her voice broke, a solitary tear running down her cheek. His vows were hollow. The courtroom fell silent. Its faces shocked. Even Meri, who had borne her own wounds in secret, ducked her head, crying openly. Janelle reached out, her own hand shaking to rest upon Christine's arm. The oneness between them was palpable, once broken, once severed, now reunited. Kody's chest was pumping like a bellows, as he at last gained the voice to speak. "That's not true," he exclaimed. "I gave this family everything. I worked day and night to support." "Order," snapped the judge, banging his gavel. "You will be given your opportunity, Mr. Brown. Sit down for now." The crack of the gavel was definitive, cutting through Kody's objection. He let himself fall back into his chair, his earlier stiffness unraveling into defeat. Christine raised her chin, her voice firm now. "No more deceit, Kody. Today the truth will be heard by everyone." And so Section 1 of the trial, the start of the end, had been composed not in legal briefs, but in unbridled, unscripted emotion. The truth wasn't written on paper. The truth was alive, breathing, resonating in the very fabric of the courtroom. This was not any case. This was the trial of love betrayed, trust shattered, and decades of sacrifice cast aside. And as Christine's words rang in the heads of every person in the room, one thing was certain: the courtroom was not full of strangers. It was full of family. And today, the truth would at last be out. Christine's words still lingered in the air like a thundercloud. When Janelle gradually pushed her chair back, her motions were controlled, measured, near surgical. But her eyes, hard, unyielding, spoke volumes. She stood tall, cradling a fat folder against her chest, and for a fleeting moment, the only noise in the courtroom was the gentle creak of the floor under her shoes. She approached the stand, her footsteps sounding increasingly loud with each step. Placing the folder down before the judge, she broke the stillness with a sound that cracked like a gunshot. Papers leaked minutely out of the edges, but she did not take the time to straighten them out. No, this wasn't about tidiness. This was about truth. Her voice, steady but shaking with repressed fury, traveled across the room. "Your Honor, this folder has bank statements. Years' worth. Transfers, withdrawals, secret accounts. Funds stolen from our family accounts without saying, without asking. Funds spent on vacations, on indulgences, on things none of us ever saw, except him." She raised her chin and fixed her eyes on Kody. "We were living on scraps, bringing up children while he built his own empire in private." Gasps echoed afresh across the gallery. Reporters pushed forward, pens scribbled madly across notepads. The evidence wasn't just emotive now. It was tangible, irrefutable, in black and white. Kody's attorney sprang to his feet. "Objection, Your Honor. These allegations are blown out of proportion." But the judge silenced him with a wave of his hand. "Sit down. The evidence will speak for itself." Janelle's hair trembled as she rummaged through the folder, removing page after page. "Here, a withdrawal of $15,000, the week our electricity came close to being turned off. Here, a deposit into an account we did not even know he had, while we asked for food. And here," she held up the last sheet, her voice shaking, "here is evidence that while we were selling personal items just to make ends meet, he was arranging a vacation with another person." The words cutting deeper than figures on paper. This wasn't money. This was betrayal, wrapped in receipts and balances. The judge leaned forward, his eyebrows furrowing as he read through the documents. "Mr. Brown, this is serious evidence." But before Kody could stutter a reply, another stood. Meri. She walked behind the others, but she had some authority. Years of silence, of being pushed aside, of swallowing pain, now it all came out. She held in one hand an envelope with a single letter, creased at the corners, the paper worn from being clutched so many times. Her tone was low, nearly breakable. This is the letter." She lifted it ever so slightly, her trembling hand. "This is where he said that I wasn't enough anymore. That after all the sacrifice, after giving everything I had, I was disposable. The room stopped. Even Christine and Janelle, who had already shared their truths, looked at her with big tear-stained eyes. Meri's lips trembled, but she went on. I remained. Through shame, through rejection, through being thrown over for him to show his love elsewhere. I remained because I had believed in family. I had believed in him. In this letter, her voice cracked, tears finally flowing down her face. This letter is how he informed me. I was no longer important. She passed the letter over to the bailiff, who took it up to the judge. The judge spread it out in his hands, his eyes reading over the words, his jaw clenched. He did not read it aloud. There was no need for him to say it. The expression on his face said everything. The silence that ensued was intolerable. All those in the room could sense the shame of Meri, her brokenness. A woman who had been the first wife, the very pillar of it all, brought down to nothing but a line in a heartless letter. Christine reached across the table, sliding her hand over Meri's. Janelle followed, her fingers covering both of theirs. For the first time in years, maybe decades, they weren't divided. They weren't fighting for scraps of affection from a man who never deserved them. They were united, sisters not rivals. The gallery broke into gasps, whispers of outrage, sadness. The reporters clacked away furiously, some their heads shaking as emotion welled up in their own eyes. This was no longer rumor. This was history. Wives banding together against the very man whom they once loved. Kody contorted in his chair, rage burning on his face. This is insane. These women are distorting everything. They're angry. They're bitter. And they're attempting to destroy me. His voice broke, desperation creeping in. But rather than compassion, his words only made the silence even more profound. The judge scowled at him, unimpressed. Meri finally turned, her gaze freezing on him for the first time in years. Her voice firm now, cut through the tension. No, Kody, you destroyed yourself. We're just here to tell the truth. The courtroom gasped again. These women had lived in the shadows of his dominance for years. Today they emerged into the light as one. And sitting there beside him, hands clasped together, tears still drying on their cheeks, one thing became horrifyingly evident to Kody. He wasn't standing trial. He was standing against a united front. 3 voices, 3 hearts, 3 women who had at last discovered their strength in each other. And for the first time in his life, Kody Brown was truly alone. The courtroom was thick with silence. Christine's rage, Janelle's evidence, Meri's heartbreaking letter. It all lingered like smoke after a fire. The wives sat united, shoulders squared, hands linked, while the judge's eyes scanned the papers before him. And then there was a noise that shattered the silence. The scraping of Kody Brown's chair. As he rose to his feet, he pounded his hand on the defense table, the sound ringing out in the room. His words burst out, aggressive and urgent. This is all lies, he bellowed. Twisted tales, half-truths from bitter women who can't move on from the past. Gasps filled the air once more, but they weren't out of sympathy. They were shock. Kody's authoritative presence now resembled a tantrum, a man grasping at straws, trying to save what was already lost. He gestured first at Christine, his shaking finger. She resented me long before today. She schemed this. Don't you realize? She wanted out. She craved attention, and now she wishes to bring me down with her lies. Christine did not blink. Her tears had evaporated, giving way to a chilly hard-glazed regard. The only lies in the room, Kody, are yours. The judge slammed his gavel. Order, Mr. Brown. You will control yourself. You'll get your turn to say something, but you will do so respectfully. Kody nodded hastily, his chest bubbling. He attempted to calm himself, adjusting his jacket, trying to force a smile which failed to reach his eyes. But the cracks were already appearing. He cleared his throat, standing in front of the judge. Your Honor, I gave it all to this family. All of it. I worked myself to death, to support 18 children and 4 wives. I bore the burden of it all, while they lounged at home, comfortable, because of me. And this is how I'm paid back. With accusations. with betrayal, with hatred. He grew louder with every sentence, the desperation seeping in. He spoke to Janelle now, poking the air with his finger. She's manipulating figures. She never did the finances well. And now she's putting it on me. Those accounts? Business accounts. For projects that were supposed to profit the family. But she never had the vision of the whole. Janelle shook her head slowly, her lips twisting into a sour smile. Business accounts don't cover secret holidays. Kody, business accounts don't account for money going missing when our children couldn't pay for college educations. Stop acting like this was for us. It was for you. The crowd grumbled once more, louder now, the tide continuing to go against him. His attorney rushed to interrupt, shuffling across the table a neatly typed sheet of notes. But Kody pushed them aside. He had no use for logic or strategy. He was struggling with sheer ego. And it was apparent. He turned his fire on Meri. His eyes narrowed. And her? She's been resentful for years. Everyone knows it. She clung to a marriage that was already over, and blamed me for her unhappiness. That letter? Taken out of context. It was me being honest. Finally honest. Because she couldn't accept reality. Meri stood up slowly, her tone soft but brutal. Honesty does not present itself as cruelty, Kody. It presents itself with kindness. You didn't break up with kindness. You broke up with pride. You broke up by informing me that I was nothing. Her words carried more power than his yelling ever had. The courtroom fell silent once more. Every set of eyes on Meri's shaking but forceful figure. Kody's face contorted. For so long, he'd shut up these women with charm, with control, with manipulation. But in this room, none of those tools functioned. He was a king without a crown, a man naked before the world. Nevertheless, he persisted. They want to make me out to be the villain, because it is simpler than conceding their own shortcomings. They were never together, always at war with one another. I was the glue that kept this family intact. Without me, there would not even be a family to speak of. The judge inched forward, his voice firm, cutting. Mr. Brown, I've heard your argument, but what I see before me is not a man keeping a family together. I see a man destroying it, through money, through abandonment, and through words no husband should ever utter to his wives. The gavel came down again. This is your warning. One more display like that, and I will hold you in contempt. Kody slumped his shoulders. His previously rosy face, now slumped in fear. He glanced toward the gallery, as if hoping to find someone, anyone who still believed him. But all he saw were cold glares and shaking heads. Christine hunched forward, her voice low but sufficient that it resounded. You can yell till you're hoarse, Kody. But the louder you scream, the more obvious it is. You're guilty, and you know it. The words pierced him like lightning. Kody's lips parted, but he made no sound. His defense was disintegrating. His tale, once so well constructed, was unraveling in his own eyes. The wives sat beside each other, solid, united, and unbreakable. The judge's eyes blazed with disapproval. The audience had already made up its mind. And Kody Brown, the man who had once thought himself untouchable, was losing it. For the first time he wasn't defending his decisions as a husband. He wasn't defending his family as a father. He was a defendant, vulnerable and desperate, watching his kingdom crumble in front of him. In real time, and the worst of it, at heart he knew this was just the start. The air inside the courtroom was thick, almost oppressive. Every gaze was fastened on Kody, who slumped with his former proud shoulders, now bowed in defeat. His previous bellows still hung in the air, but they no longer held strength. They were now hollow-sounding, like the yells of a man who knows the walls are closing in. The judge pushed up his glasses, ready to call the next witness. But Christine didn't let him. She stood slowly up from her chair. Her hands trembled, her chest rose and fell with sharp breaths. But her eyes, those eyes were flames. She moved towards Kody, and in a voice that cracked, but rumbled all at the same time, she spoke the words that would make this day remembered. Kody, I hate you. The courtroom gasped. Some covered their pearls, others their mouths in astonishment. The words cut through the silence with more power than any gavel ever could. Tears pricked in Christine's eyes. But she didn't blink. She didn't care that the world was watching. For years she had been silenced, dismissed, treated as an afterthought. But today her truth would be spoken. She moved forward, her voice shaking but surging with each sentence. I despise what you did to us. I despise the way you led us to believe in forever and orchestrated your exit. I despise the way you smiled on the outside, playing the role of the ideal husband, while secretly ripping us apart little by little. Kody's face clenched, his lips trembling as if he were about to strike again. But something in Christine's tone prevented him from moving. This was not rage alone. It was heartbreak released. You didn't just betray me, Kody, she went on, her tears flowing freely now. You betrayed our children. You betrayed the family that we built with our own hands. Do you know how many nights I cried myself to sleep while you rejected us? Do you know how many times I pleaded for your attention, for your love, only to be told I wasn't enough? Her voice broke and the gallery wept with her. Strangers felt her pain as if they too had borne the weight she had carried. Christine pounded her fist against her chest. I hate that I gave you everything. My youth, my loyalty, my heart, and you used it like nothing. You discarded me like trash, Kody, and I will never forgive you for that. The judge's gaze softened as he observed her. Even he, a man weathered by years of cases, could tell this wasn't mere testimony. This was decades of suffering spilling out before the world. Janelle stood second, her face pale but resolute. She put her hand on the shoulder of Christine before turning to Kody. She is right, Kody. You ruined everything. You deceived us about money, about your future plans, about your commitment. I trusted you. I thought we were creating something true between us, something that would last. But you cared only for yourself. Her voice trembled, but her words were biting. You didn't betray just a wife. You betrayed a partner. And that betrayal seeped into every aspect of this family. You took everything from us and forged a new existence in the shadows. I will never forget that. I will never forgive that. Meri stood up last. She moved slowly, but her face was hard. She had kept quiet long enough. Her agony hid under blankets of shame. Now she released it. Kody, you said I was disposable. Do you recall that? Her voice shook, and tears pricked at the corners of her eyes. I read what you said repeatedly, over and over and over, trying to get it through your head, how the man I gave my whole life to could make me nothing. Do you have any idea what it does to someone, to be invisible in your own marriage, to be told you don't count? Her voice increased in volume, became harder. I stayed, Kody. I stayed even when you acted as though I had already gone. And for what? So you could discard me like I never lived at all. That is not love, it's cruelty. The three women stood together now, bound not by love for him, but by the wounds he had inflicted on them. The gallery wept. Journalists rubbed away tears as they took notes. Even the bailiff, stoic and composed, blinked hard as though battling to maintain his professionalism. Kody attempted to stand up once more. His face flushed, his fists clenched. You're distorting it all. I loved you all in my own way. I gave what I could. Christine's voice overrode him, louder than ever before. You gave us nothing, Kody. You gave us hurt. You gave us shattered promises. And now you have nothing, because you chose nothing. The words hung like a verdict in the courtroom. The judge brought his gavel crashing down. Order. Order in this court. But even as the din subsided, the emotional blow remained. For the first time, Kody Brown was left speechless. His defenses, his excuses, his manipulations, all laid bare, for what they were, and against the raw collective truth of three women, he had nothing left. The climax had arrived. The wives once broken had found their voices, and Kody, once invincible, was left flailing in the ruins of his own design. The gavel came down once more. This court has heard enough. But the truth did not require a gavel to verify it. Christine had already sealed it with her words. Kody, I hate you. Those 4 words would ring louder than the walls of that courtroom. The courtroom hung silent, not the silence of tranquility, but the silence after a storm, where air was stagnant with thunder, and no one dared to breathe too hard. Christine's last words. Kody, I hate you. still clung to the air like smoke after flames. Kody sat slumped in the defense table, his face ashen, lips tightly compressed. The once proud patriarch, who had based his existence on control, charm, and manipulation, now resembled a man trapped. His eyes roved frantically across the courtroom, pleading desperately for sympathy, for some glimmer of support. Cold stares and tear-stained faces were all he encountered. Across the room, Christine, Janelle, and Meri sat together. They didn't link hands, but the camaraderie between them was real, palpable to all in the gallery. For all those years they had been fractured, pitted against one another, forced to fight for scraps of attention. But today they stood as one. Their collective pain had transformed into their collective strength. The judge craned forward, his face grave but unyielding. He ruffled the pile of documents on the table in front of him, smoothed his glasses, and delivered his verdict in a tone that was heavy with finality. This court has heard enough. The words hit with the force of a bell, tolling in a cathedral, loud, resonant, absolute. Kody shifted in his seat, his lawyer whispering frantically in his ear. But the judge raised a hand. "Mr. Brown, sit down. You've had your chance to speak." Kody's jaw tightened, but he obeyed, sinking lower into his chair. The judge went on. "This is not a matter of money or breached contracts. This is a matter of breached trust. Of a man who opted for betrayal as against loyalty, for deceit rather than honesty, and for pride instead of responsibility." He gazed at Kody straight on, his eyes so piercing that they broke through the very last of Kody's defenses. "You appeared before this family with your vows of unity. What you brought was devastation. And this court will not and cannot ignore the devastation you have wrought." A murmur ran through the gallery. Scribes wrote rapidly, their pens scratching over paper, recording each condemnatory word. The judge raised a paper. "With respect to financial mismanagement and concealed assets, in favor of the plaintiffs, Meri Brown, Janelle Brown, and Christine Brown, this court rules. Mr. Brown, you are directed to turn over complete financial disclosure of all accounts, both current and in the past. Any money hidden away will be seized and distributed as rightful marital assets." Kody's face turned red with rage. His lips parted in protest, but the judge's gavel came down once. The crack echoed like thunder, quieting him in an instant. "In addition," the judge went on, "this court recognizes the emotional and psychological damage that has been caused to these women by years of manipulation and neglect. As much as the law cannot erase the past, it can offer redress. Thus, Mr. Brown, you are directed to pay spousal support and damages as stipulated in this order. Your legacy, as you have known it, has been brought to an end." Gasps erupted from the courtroom. Christine's hand leapt to her lips, tears brimming in her eyes. Not tears of sorrow this time, but of relief. Janelle let out a shuddering breath she'd been holding for years, her eyes closed. Meri brushed away a single tear from her face, her lips twisting into the smallest, most poignant smile. Justice wasn't just a word for the first time in decades. It was real. It was here. Was here. Was here. The judge addressed the wives. His tone softened marginally. "To the plaintiffs, I salute your courage. You have stood here not only for yourselves, but for your children, and for each human being who has ever been silenced under the guise of love. This decision is not only a ruling, it is acknowledgement of your reality." The gallery rose with soft applause, quickly stifled by the bailiff, but the feeling could not be suppressed. Journalists wiped away tears. Strangers in the rear clasped their chests, overcome by the bravery they had just seen. Kody, on the other hand, appeared devastated. His kingdom had fallen apart in one afternoon. His wives, those whose stature he had boasted about once, now towered over him. Without him, his legacy, the narrative he had held onto for years, had been changed before his very eyes. He leaned in, his voice cracking into a pleading whisper. "Christine, Janelle, Meri, please, don't do this. Don't annihilate me like this." Christine spun, her gaze hot but serene. "You destroyed yourself, Kody. We just finally quit letting you pull us down with you," Janelle said, her voice firm.
We're not your wives anymore. We're not your property. We are free. And Meri, the one he had treated so callously, served the last hit. You once said I was disposable. Well, Kody, today this court proved you're the one who's disposable. We will rise without you. The gavel crashed one last time. This court is adjourned. The room exploded. Journalists poured through the doors to report the news. Strangers hugged the women, speaking in hushed tones of encouragement. The bailiff led Kody away, his head bowed, his feet dragging as if the burden of his defeat weighed upon every joint in his body. Christine, Janelle, and Meri stood together in the middle of the courtroom, ringed by pandemonium, but absolutely still. For the first time in years, they weren't victims. They weren't competitors. They weren't shadowed. In Kody's narrative, they were survivors. They were warriors. And today, they were winners. As the flashes of the cameras went off, Christine whispered quietly, more to herself than to anyone, "It's over." But the reality was, it wasn't an end. It was a start, a new era. One that was not penned by Kody Brown, but by the women who had finally escaped him. And somewhere deep within himself, Kody understood the truth. The world would recall this day, not as the demise of a patriarch, but as the ascension of the women who were brave enough to stand up against him.